always tell people who want career advice and then just wrote it down to 12 words. So you learn from everyone, but you follow no one. You observe the patterns and you learn from everyone to minimize the amount of mistakes. But you have to follow no one, right? Because it is your story that you need to write.
Welcome to YanaTV. Today our guest is Bernard Leong, who is the founder of Analyze Asia, an independent angel investor. He also has a PhD in physics from Cambridge University and worked in such companies as Singtel, Airbus, and Amazon Web Services.
And actually, I just caveat is SingPost, which I used to work for as well.
Yeah. That's right, SingPost. So you have both the academical background, the business background, and there's also the life background.
I think the way to think about it is my career is very non-linear. I started as an academic. I was doing theoretical physics in cosmology, astrophysics. Then I went into work in the Human Genome Project in the Wellcome Trust Center Institute, which is one of the most renowned institutes. And I came back, worked for Genome Institute of Singapore, and then went into the startup world. So in the startup side, I did 2 companies. One of them is called Chalkboard. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but there is a second one that I did that eventually called SG Entrepreneurs. It's like a TechCrunch Singapore site. Eventually got acquired by Tech in Asia. And then the next stage of my life, I went into corporate because when I finished Chalkboard, I was asking myself, if someday I'm going to be a CEO of a startup, maybe I should go and learn how to be a better manager. So essentially, we talk about me joining Vistaprint, SingPost, Amazon Web Services, Warhub, and also Airbus. In these different companies, I learned different things, and now
here you are.
Now I'm independent, and I'm actually thinking through what is the company that I'm going to be building, specifically in the enterprise AI side. And then working my way there.
It is very interesting, and I think it's also quite unusual with your background. I read some of the articles that you have out there in the internet, and in one of them you mentioned that when you decided to study physics, your family was very supportive, your father was very supportive, but some other people thought that the only career you could possibly have is to be a teacher or civil servant and nothing else really. And if it's not, for your family and your father sort of courage and believe in you, then probably you wouldn't have completed it.
Yeah, my late father has been one of the most important supporters of my life. I think one of the things that if you think about a typical Asian, let's say we're living in the 1980s, 1990s, your career path is rather very set. Is if you want to go for the top of your career, you most likely will be a professional, doctor, lawyer, or even business person, right? And what I did was pretty out of the blue, because at that point in time, Singapore hasn't started going into what is called today we call a knowledge economy. And I just happened to say, okay, I like physics. I like to solve problems with going through first principles. And then essentially what happened was that I did a PhD in physics and realized that those skills are actually be able to map into the different things I do. So when I think about how I work in different industry, different verticals, I start from what in physics we call first principles. That means asking the most important questions about what the problem is and try to find solutions from there, which is actually not very different from academia, startup, or even in the corporate sector. You're just basically solving problems.
And those are some very big companies, and you also have had leading positions in them. So I'm just curious, what was maybe the biggest learning or realization that you've had over your a corporate career path, something that really stands out for you and particularly equips you now to be an entrepreneur?
Well, I think when you're in a corporate career, you're trying to focus on aligning with different people for a certain specific outcome that will actually help assist the business. Maybe I tell you a bit of a story.
Please.
About when we were in SingPost. I think on my first day when I joined SingPost, actually, it was probably one of the best management teams that I've ever worked with. I think we were redesigning the post office on the first day. And because I was coming in as the chief digital officer, I had to work with the person who leads the post office, the person who leads logistics, and we tried to figure out what is the modern post office is going to look like. And it was straight in, we have very quick time to turn around, to change the impression of a post office being a place doing all kinds of services down to something that's very specific to the core of what the postal service should be. And we actually even did some things like, okay, we're going to launch these new digital services. Here's what the plan is. We're going to put the icons there. But what you see is that every symbol you see on the physical world is actually has a place in the digital so that the customer can realize what it was. So I think that's one of the key highlights about it took me 4 years to actually transform the entire post office. In fact, I ended up becoming the head of the post office, which actually I ran the entire business of the retail for Singpost, from dealing with government services, dealing with big corporations like Western Union, dealing with remittances, and then also redesigned a national icon for the Singpost, which is a SAM machine, which very interestingly won 2 Global Postal Tech Awards for that year. I remember the essay that we wrote, it was the future of post office in Singapore is to have 5 million post offices. And the question is, what does that mean, right? What it really means is that when we redesigned the SAM machine, we actually redesigned from the iPad. And our belief is that in 10 years' time, the kiosk would disappear, and eventually everyone would just hold the iPad on the screen. That's why we put an iPad on, and subsequently, if the kiosk ever disappears, you'll go into, and then everybody basically having the post office in where they are and able to send things, etc. from there. I think that's one of the major things I learned in corporate is the ability to align different people with different interests and try to solve a common problem.
Beautiful. If I were to ask you for a person who would like to advance in the corporate career and maybe particularly wants to be in a leadership position and stay in a leadership position and be really good at what they're doing, what do you feel number one quality they need to have?
I think there are a few things, right? For one is a very customer-centric focus, because you need to know who your customers are and how you deal with it. But for yourself, when you lead that team, you need to be empathetic to their needs. I think a lot of in Asian culture, people tend to micromanage. That's something that I have actually not do. I tend to help. I tend to look at myself to that my role to people who work with me, not under me, even though the org chart says so. But the way to give them is to empower them and say, how can I unblock you? If this is the 3 things you want to focus this week, what are the things you need from me so that I can help you to achieve those 3 things?
When we talk about younger generation, it's very hard to retain the talent.
Yeah.
Because people are moving from place to place, from company to company, and no one stays for a long time. Like our parents and grandparents sometimes work their entire life in the same company. I mean, we don't do that anymore. So there's this conversation about, does it mean like we are less reliable?
My father actually worked for a company for 50 years. If you calculate, he started at the age probably 13, and then, and probably around 60 plus, and then he retired. This is one of the things that I really thought is something that I can emulate. But when I graduated, the world is very different. I think the average work life for one company for an employee is about 3 years. If you are in the digital segment, etc., it's less than 1 to 1.5 years. Then the question is, what does loyalty mean in a modern context? So when my father died, I wrote an essay about what is the thing that I really learned from him. I learned from him that loyalty is important, but I have to adapt it to the modern context of what it means today to me. So one of the rules and the reason why I have such a non-linear career is that I always do not join when I work in one industry, when I leave the company, I do not join the competitor in the same industry.
So that's your loyalty to the previous company.
So if I'm in Singpost, I will have to turn down logistics company, postal company. So there's one. Then I moved on to Airbus, and then when I leave, I won't be joining Boeing anyway, because there's only two of them, or maybe Comac, the Chinese one. Then I went to AWS, and obviously I can't go to Google and Microsoft. So in each one of the journey, I find that actually having that loyalty to the organization makes it really, really amicable. And I still have a very good relationship with all my employers as of today, even with Warhub, which I recently left. I think one of the things that also enables me is the ability to see different industries. What are the similarities and what are the differences? And that also helps me to think about different problems and have a very different perspective to things. I think, there was this thing that Steve Jobs said: you cannot look forward, but you need to connect the dots.
Yes,
backwards, right?
You look backwards,
so you connect the dots, and a lot of things that I think about in each part of the journey, sometimes I actually have to go back and withdraw from some of those experiences that think about it. And I think this whole thing about loyalty actually benefited me to have such a non-linear career.
When we start talking about loyalty and career, I mean, kind of to just unfold what you were discussing, because when we look at it from a company, from the employer point of view, of course, they would like people to stay, right? So as long as possible, because I mean, when you have your staff turnover, it takes a lot of money to train new people, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and it also sets the profitability and efficiency of the company back. So it's a problem for the company, to go through this.
But I think there's a very good book. I think it was written by Reid Hoffman, and it's called The Alliance, from the loyalty perspective on that. Is every person's career is a tour of duty. It's like in the military, you go through different tours of duty as such. I think the way how employers need to think about, of course, it's good to retain people who were there for a very long time. That's great, right? But one of the things I have adopted as principle is when somebody from my team comes to me and tender their resignation, and if I really think that this person is competent, I'll ask a couple of questions. I'll ask them, what's this next job look like? Do you earn better? Does it improve your roles and responsibility? I think that's the real key question that I will ask. Does this actually help you to take your next steps of your career? And if the person say yes, then it's like, it's okay. I think it's of course my loss that year, but I think if you can get to a better stage, it is, I think this is what success means for me as a manager, or so the one thing I always told my team, I always tell them that there will be a day where I will leave this job, and if you can take my job, or I can even go higher than who I am, then I know that I'm being successful. I think a successful leader is not about whether, how many big wins and tearing down everyone else, but I think a successful leader is one that brings out the best in his team.
In Asia and in Singapore, we can definitely see that. When you just look around at people, particularly professional people, there's a tendency where people feel that they need to associate with certain type of people in order to become successful. And I think this is also where this whole idea of the Ivy League universities came from, right? I mean, okay, you go there for the degree, you go for study, but you largely go for the networking, right? So what do you think about that?
It's interesting you mentioned this. So there's actually a very good article that was written by C.S. Lewis, who's one of my favorite writers that I follow, called The Inner Ring. So, like anyone, I've also gone through a very good school, Cambridge University. And then, of course, in the years of the corporate, I would try to, I want to work for the best companies, be it Airbus, Amazon, as such. And then, and of course, if you're an entrepreneur, you aspire to be the Forbes, 40 under 40, etc., etc. One of the things that when I decided that I want to come back to become an entrepreneur, as of in this stage where I'm going to rewrite the story, every entrepreneur will go through two things. One is the struggle of all the things what if things don't work out, failure, because the chance of you being successful is 1 in a million. Regardless of who you are, okay? Whether you are from Ivy League, whether you're from a rich family, it's the same. Okay, the odds are the same. The real difficult part of that is the inner ring. Why? Because when things do not work out, the first question you're going to be asked, when will I ever be in maybe YPO? Yes, I know there's a lot of people who wants to join the YPO, or maybe your millionaires list, billionaires list, and then when you try to get into the inner ring, a few things happen. You try to exclude people as well. I think when you reach a point in time when you want to think about the privilege of a lifetime is to be yourself, right? This is a very great Joseph Campbell quote. And I think to be yourself, if I were to say today, I just want to limit to that three things I want to work on. I think to get away from the inner ring, I think the first thing I want to do is do the work on the things that I really love, right? So that's number one. Number two, I have, before I went into the corporate, I just got married. Now I have 3 kids, right? Spend all your time, the quality time with them. Everybody say, great entrepreneurs must be like Elon Musk. You must have a demon mode, and all that. But I would just give a very great counter example. Rockefeller, you probably know. If you read the book Titan, he spends 2 of his days working from home and spending a lot of time with his kids. So that's a counter example of a successful entrepreneur does not need to spend time with his family. Okay, so the second part. The third one, I think, is the thing to tell yourself that do not be swayed by things like the inner ring, where you try to be aspired to that. And it's difficult, okay? I'm not perfect. I will think about it, but I have to try to weed myself of that. I think the important part to me, why I want to be an entrepreneur, is to be myself, is to do great work. If I'm not spending my time focusing on those things, then it is not. And so what do I substitute with the inner ring? There's the people who you have worked with, friends, people who you spend a lot of time with. I think those are like, even spending time with you and Ravi, I feel that those are quality time, right? I think having that kind of quality time with people that really matter and not being part of the inner ring, I think that is like the 3 things that I think about that's becoming very important to me.
Fundamentally, we're talking here about authentic connections. We're talking about that you choose who you want to be with and want to interact with because you really want it, not because it fills somehow the list and they are on paper perfect match for your social interactions. Yeah, right.
It's not the social interaction. It's like, do I need to be with this very famous person? Does it really matter in the greater scheme of things? I think that is the part that I find that a lot of people who went into building their own companies fell into this trap. It took me, I think it wasn't until I reread C.S. Lewis's The Inner Ring, it really made me think through, why do I want to do this? I think to come back and do this again, really you have to be very mindful of all the things that can go wrong. Anything that can go wrong, right? Murphy's Law.
This is a very deep and very refreshing perspective, I must say, especially from the person who has such a diverse academical and business background.
And worse, we are in Asian societies, right? Where your success is very determined by which ring you're in, which inner ring you're in, right? And that's very scary sometimes, right? And I think if you start to just take away that from it, I think you will live a happier life.
That's it. You can say almost a trade-off, right? So when you choose your own happiness and your family happiness and authentic connections with people, then your life just becomes much more fulfilled on so many levels rather than being constrained to a very small group of people. But of course, it's an individual choice of every human being. But I just love how you show sort of the story of your life and your development, how, you came to this realization right now. And you think you're a father of 3 children. Mm. So I am just curious, when you look at your kids, how old are they?
4, 6, 11.
Okay. So very young still. Mm. It's going to be a while until they fully go into the workplace.
Yeah, I think they are going to be in a very, very different world.
Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted to ask. Exactly. So what do you think is coming for them?
I think unfortunately, due to what is happening politically, geopolitically, I think the world is going to go back into a multipolar world. I think there's going to be a lot more regional. Business is no longer that much global. Some parts will be still global, but some parts will be still regional. But a lot of the action will be more inward looking than outward looking. So that's the first thing. The second is the ability to navigate the complexities of working with different regions, right? And I think they have to think through what is, anything they can energy trip them. Think about a sanction, for example, right? If they work in, say, something like semiconductors, now it's becoming very, very difficult to be able to sell semiconductors to China from the US, right? And a lot of the nations out there, when they think about we are in the middle of two powers having conflict, and we do not want to get involved. How would they respond, right? If of course the possibility of war. I think we are fortunate. Since 1945 until maybe up to last 2 years, we haven't really seen very, very major wars happening, and it feels to me that they are going to be the ones navigating that. I think about that for them every day, but I think it is not up to us to decide. I think all we can decide is what we have, and it's the same for them. They have to figure out what is the best way forward for them.
Absolutely. As a parent, right, when you look at them, and in general, like you feel as a parent these days any parent who has small children, what do you feel would be maybe like some of the really important qualities that we really need to translate to our children or imprint or educate them so that they have it to make sure they're ready for the future?
I always tell people who want career advice, and then just wrote it down to 12 words. So you learn from everyone, but you follow no one. You observe the patterns and you work like hell. So the reason why you need to learn from everyone is, of course, to minimize the amount of mistakes, but you have to follow no one, right? Because it is your story that you need to write. And then we just have to look at all the patterns, what's going on in the world, and then try to figure out there's something that you think that this is what you're going to be passionate, and then you go out with all your effort. I think if you just do those 4 things, I think it's important. It's like, do they need to go to school? Yes and no, because I'm sometimes very impressed by the fact that my daughter could just go to YouTube and figure out how to solve a Rubik's Cube, right? So it is the same principle, right? Today, if you want to do anything, you can go to YouTube and learn it, right? So I think the information, unlike when in our times we have to go to the library, we have to, borrow books, because books is such a very scarce resource. But today, the information is everywhere. That's number one. But it is also your own responsibility to think critically of what you learn from whichever the source you get your information from. So I think those 2 things are very important.
Bernard, thank you so much for joining us today. That was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And that was Bernard Leong on YanaTV. And we would love to hear from you. What is your experience when it comes to the career transition? Was your path linear or non-linear? Do you feel that the traditional ways how the society should be going, or we embracing something new? And if new, what is that? So please share with us in the comments. We would love to hear from you. And I love being at Muse Studio where we are hosting YanaTV. So thank you for having us. And the most important, please remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel and share this episode with friends. The change starts with the conversation, and I see you next time. Yes, we forgot that. Think first.
Think first, not think down.
Yeah. That's right. Think first. Well, you just have such a impressive, credentials that I don't even know where to start.